Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Sean Blackburn with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Cameron Herold. He is the founder of the COO Alliance. Cameron, how are you doing today?
Hey, Sean. Really well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad to have you on the show. And today I'm excited about our topic. I think it's going to be super helpful for a lot of people in our audience. We're talking 3 easy steps to free PR. But before we jump into that, if you could tell our listeners a little bit about you and your background and what it is that you guys do over at the COO Alliance.
Sure. So we started the only network of its kind in the world for the second in command. And the reason for it was I had been a part of a number of major organizations for entrepreneurs for years, like EO, YPO, Vistage, the Genius Network, Mastermind Talks, a number of different groups that I would go to year after year. And it was always focused on the entrepreneur. And then we saw that there were groups for, marketers and engineers and lawyers, but there was never a true network and a place for the second in command to go and learn from each other and with each other. So we started the organization called the COO Alliance. And then prior to that, I've been coaching CEOs and entrepreneurs globally now for about 12 years. I've coached the CEO and the COO at Sprint. I coached a monarchy over in the Middle East. I've coached a number of technology companies, a lot of offline businesses, but also a lot of online pure play, and a bunch that are actually in the digital marketing area as well.
Wow, that's incredible. And, excited to talk about our topic today, which is how to earn, free PR. You've got a book out on the subject. Maybe tell our audience a little bit about, how did you kind of come to PR as a passion point and what was the idea behind starting the book?
Yeah, well, I was groomed as an entrepreneur. My father and both my grandfathers owned their own companies. So when we were growing up, we saw a lot of the kind of very early stage entrepreneurial lessons. And I used to see my dad and his company getting free PR. And then I started my first company when I was 20 years old. I had 12 employees when I was 20. And
Wow.
I was running a house painting business, and I started getting the press to cover me about my house painting business. I was getting covered in the newspaper and on television at 20 years old for running this little house painting gig. And I realized that everyone believed what they read in the newspaper or saw on TV more than they believed my advertising. And I would take photocopies. I'd literally take a photocopier and photocopy copies of the newspaper and hand it out to people. And that was enough credibility to land jobs. So I saw the power of free PR. And then I also realized that the journalists didn't really have time to go out and uncover stories. The reality is that every single journalist who wakes up this morning is thinking to themselves, what the heck am I going to write about today? And the only way that the media outlets make money is if they have a lot of viewers and listeners and readers of their content, right? Whether it's newspapers, radio, TV, bloggers, whatever, they need viewers and listeners, or they can't sell any advertising. So you're actually doing them a favor in giving them that content. So my passion around it came from just seeing the power of PR and how easy it was to generate it. And then I also realized that you don't need PR firms to do it. It's much easier to actually do it in-house than to try to delegate it out to a third party that doesn't get your culture or company.
Yeah, I love that model overall of owning your own story and finding the opportunities yourself. And so what are some of the results that you've had from doing this in the past, earning all of this free PR?
It's going to sound a little braggadocious, but
go for it. Yeah, I would love to hear.
So for a period of about 6.5 years, I was the chief operating officer of a brand called 1-800-GOT-JUNK. I took them from 14 employees at the head office when I joined to just over 3,000 employees when I left 6.5 years later.
Wow.
And in that time, we landed 5,200 stories in the media. And that included, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the physical print editions, by the way, of Forbes, Fortune, Inc., Entrepreneur, Success, American Airlines Magazine. We were on Oprah. We had a 6-minute piece on Oprah. We were on Dr. Phil 17 times. So pretty much every major news outlet that you could imagine, we were covered in. And then even when I left there 12 years ago, I've personally been covered in the physical print editions of Forbes magazine, a full-page article about me in Forbes, Fortune magazine, Success, like a lot of very, very solid print. And then TV stuff, right? Like I've been on a lot of major TV shows like Bloomberg, Donnie Deutsch, Al Jazeera, so ABC, the Today Show. Like there's all kinds of press that are really easy to get. And the reality is, again, every media outlet is looking for content and they don't have time to go out and get it.
How is it that you approach, and maybe we can jump into the 3 steps, or maybe we could even just hear an introduction to the 3 steps that you want to talk about today. But, how is it that someone sitting in our audience says, okay, yes, I'd like that. What are some of those first steps?
Well, yeah. So I actually wrote a book on it called Free PR, and I had to codify it for a former coaching client. I was actually coaching the CEO of a company called Grasshopper.com. And Grasshopper wanted to build an in-house PR team, and I wrote their PR manual, and that became the rough kind of content that we started the book Free PR from. That was years ago that I did that for them. But here's the basics of how to generate free PR, and this works, by the way, in B2C, it works in B2B, it works in pure trade press. The first part is the reality that every media outlet needs content, and you're not asking them to cover you. You're actually giving them a story that they need. So the whole pitch is, do you have 2 minutes? I think I have a great story for you. So here's how it all plays out. Every company has at least 3 to 5 angles about their company. And an angle about your company is kind of the story headline that you might see in a newspaper or a magazine. Okay, so every company has, let's say, 3 to 5, and that might be the overcoming adversity story. It might be the story of how the entrepreneur quit their job and started the company. Right. It may be the story about the company culture, or it may be the story about how your company's product has had such a huge impact on your customer's life and how it's changed your customer's life. So that's the core starting point, is coming up with 3 to 5 angles about your company. And then for each angle, it's coming up with 3 to 5 bullet points that make up the framework of that story. The next part to remember is that every journalist, every writer, everyone who works in the media, they want to write their own story. They don't want you to write it for them. And where most companies go sideways is they try to write this long story and send it out as a newswire or a press release. But the reality is, as soon as you send out a press release, you're in a stack of 400 press releases, right? Every editor's job, every news desk job is to sit down with 400 press releases a day and say no to 390 of them and say maybe to 10. So what we do is we avoid that whole traffic and we go with the path of least resistance, and we pick up the phone and call the actual journalist, the person who's writing the story or the person who's doing the news on TV, et cetera. We phone them directly and say, hey, do you have 2 minutes? I think I have a great story for you. And they're only going to say one of two things. Either, yes, I have 2 minutes. What's the story? Or no, I'm too busy. I'm on a deadline. At which point we say, great. Do you mind if I call you on Monday or Thursday next week?
Right.
So I treat PR like a sales function, not a marketing function. I tend to have the salesperson or sales mentality run it because they have to be better at handling rejection. And what I've always realized is that if you call a journalist and they say, no, I'm busy, I'm actually one step closer to a yes because I know that's their phone number and I know they pick it up, right? Versus sending an email off blind and wondering if they've ever opened it or trying to track it through Hootsuite. I don't know if they've ever really engaged. Not Hootsuite, HubSpot, I'm sorry.
Right. And so, in the book, you have 3 easy steps to free PR. What are those 3 steps?
Sure. So step 1 is knowing your angles, right? Coming up with the 3 to 5 angles for your company. Step 2 is knowing your target. And it's realizing that every target audience is very different. So let's say, for an example, that we were a B2C company or a B2B. Let's say we were a B2B company, right? So we're a B2B company. We're marketing our services to other businesses, and we want to get covered in the business journals or business news. We could get Wall Street Journal, New York Times business section, Forbes, Fortune, Entrepreneur Success, Inc., the CNN Money. Those are all news outlets for business, but they're all very, very different business shows, right? Or business outlets, right? Fortune magazine versus Entrepreneur magazine or versus the Wall Street Journal's business section, right? Completely different news outlets with completely different reader types. So you have to understand the archetype of the person who is devouring that content. And you have to, in the old world, they called it spin. You have to position your story or spin your story to match that archetype or that avatar of the reader or viewer or listener, right?
Sure.
Your business show is B2B marketers. Somebody else's business show might be startup entrepreneurs. Hell, my business podcast, the Second in Command podcast, is really for second in command. All business podcasts, but very different listeners. So that's number 2 is know your target. Number 3 is pick up the phone. And this is the magic bullet or the silver bullet. Everybody else is sending emails and news wires. When you pick up the phone, you get through to them because no one else is phoning them, right? How many times a day does your phone ring? Maybe 3, maybe 4, right? So you've basically got a 25% shot of being picked up. But how many emails do we get a day? 200. So now you've got like a 0.5% chance.
Right.
So the pick up the phone is magic. And I'll give you one final kind of like a +1. If you look at every newspaper article or every magazine article or a lot of the blogs, there's a photo. And the photos always have a credit. They have the person's name who took the photo right beside the photo. When you pick up the phone and call a photographer and say, hey, do you have 2 minutes? I think I have a good photo op for you. Every single one of them will say yes, because no one's ever phoned them except their mom.
Right? Wow, that is incredible. Yeah, what a great tip. I love that.
This stuff works. Yeah, I'll give you another really, really powerful example of when B2B PR has really worked out well for me. So years ago, we were running 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and we were going to a trade show, a big conference called the Waste Expo, like probably one of the most boring trade shows you could ever go to. 6,000 people from the garbage industry, right? So it's the head people from Waste Management, Republic, BFI, Allied, and they all go to this big, huge conference and spend 3 days talking about garbage and waste. So we wanted to do business deals with all the big garbage companies. We wanted them to refer business to us. Essentially, we wanted to have like super affiliate deals where Waste Management would refer business to us. We'd give them a 10% fee, right? Bob's your uncle. We couldn't get in their door. We couldn't get in their door at the national, at the head office. We couldn't get in their doors at regional offices. So I went to the trade show and I was talking to all of them. But that's normal. Everybody does that. What we did was 2 weeks before the trade show, we phoned all the trade journals. And there were 4 major trade journals that covered the garbage industry. And here's what we said. Hey, are you going to Waste Expo in 2 weeks? Because our COO will be there. He'd love to meet with you for a coffee to tell you about the new business deals we're talking about at Waste Expo. All 4 trade journals said yes. Now, the business deals we were talking about were the business deals I was trying to pitch the garbage industry on. So very true. We hadn't done any, but I was going to tell them about the ones we were working on or trying to do. So they all met with me for coffee, half-hour meetings on the first day because they didn't know who else to talk to at Waste Expo, nor did they really want to be at the conference in the first place. So I met with all the journalists. The week after the conference, when all the major garbage people went back to their offices and the trade journals started showing up on their desk, we were on the front cover of 2 and we were on inside of the other 2. So all 4 major trade journals had photos of me and stories of me talking about the business deals that I had been talking to these people at their booth about. That's how we landed Waste Management and Oakleaf Waste Management.
Wow, that's incredible.
Right? So very pure strategic approach, very surgical. And that's how we kind of took sales and marketing and PR and really focused in on it in a pure B2B play.
I really like that. And even when you were speaking earlier about, approaching the different publications as different entities, obviously, and different angles are going to speak to them. It's almost like buyer personas. Once again, if you're talking in the, kind of terms of sales, once you get this sort of PR, what is the best play? PR is great, but how do you utilize it and amplify it once you do get it?
Yeah, this is huge because this is where most companies completely screw this thing up. Most companies go, well, I was just on Oprah. Nothing happened. Well, that's because you didn't amplify it. You need to take every news article you get. You need to email it out to your customers. You need to post it 3 times on Facebook, 5 times on LinkedIn, 5 times on Twitter. In the old days, I used to push it out on Dig and Reddit and StumbleUpon as well. I would link it to our PR page. I would make sure that the online news outlets had links back to our website. So once they run the article, I would then contact them and say, hey, I know you mentioned 1-800-GOT-JUNK 4 times in the article. Can you link it back to our website? Or I know you mentioned the COO Alliance. Can you link it back to our website? Or I know you mentioned free PR. Can you link it to the Amazon? So if you push them, they will link it. And then if you share it and give it to your employees to share it, that's where the amplification happens. So the real beauty is that third-party credibility, right? And the reality is that all of your normal customers, your normal people that you're selling to or marketing to, they don't realize that you had to push to get the story. What they think is, wow, that news outlet found you. News outlets don't have time to find anybody.
Wow, I love that. And, Cameron, this has been a great perspective on, the 3 easy steps to get free PR, but I'm sure that there is a lot more that's in the book that you have coming out. What's the best way for someone to get the book specifically and then also to connect with you?
Yeah, just go on Amazon for sure and get a copy of free PR or get multiple copies for your sales and PR teams. I also, by the way, have a book called Meetings Suck, which is for every employee at every company to read so they stop complaining about meetings and they learn how to actually run them and participate in them. But that would be the best place to start, is grab the books off Amazon. And then secondly, if they look at the COOalliance.com, they can also listen in on the podcast, the Second in Command podcast. We have links there as well.
I was going to mention the podcast as well. Yeah. So the Second in Command podcast, tell us just a quick blurb about, the focus of the show, and it's a podcast, folks. So you could definitely find it, everywhere that podcasts are available.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. Everyone really wants to hear the story of the CEO, right? You want to hear Brian's story at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Well, I interviewed Eric, the COO at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Or everyone wants to hear about the founder of Bumble. I interviewed Sarah, the COO at Bumble. Or I interviewed Harley, the COO at Shopify. I interviewed Anna, the COO at Bulletproof Coffee. So we're trying to get the rest of the story. And so often the media gets kind of the great example would be you get Mark Zuckerberg's story on Facebook, but wow, Sheryl Sandberg has an incredible story of how they really built it as well. And her side is just as real, but it's from a very different perspective.
I love that. Yeah, so check it out. It's everywhere that podcasts can be found. And, Cameron, thanks again for being on the show. We really appreciate your perspective. And guys, go grab a book from Amazon, Free PR.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big 3, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.